Good evening, everyone. The Ranter is back to go in yet another one of his rambling diatribes at the news of the day. Now, this particular day, we've had an interesting bit of testimony done by the what is called the whistleblower, Dr. Rich Bright, who came before Congress to discuss the Trump administration's response to the coronavirus, especially in the early aspects of it, as well as the possibility of a vaccine. I am going to go through this information, and I'm getting this from the Rolling Stone. Dr. Rich Bright, Dr. Rich Bright, the former director of the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, BARDA, testified before Congress on Thursday and painted a bleak picture about the administration's coronavirus response and the potential of a vaccine in a short timeline. Bright spoke about many missed opportunities by the Trump administration in the early days of the pandemic. Quote, "I believe we could have done better," he said in the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Health. "I believe there were critical steps we did not take in time." Notably, Bright quoted medical supplier Mike Bowen, who sent Bright an email in January that talked about the complete decimated supply of N95 respirators to protect healthcare workers, adding that the government refused to ramp up production. "We are in deep shit, the world is," Bowen said and warned. Bright said he pushed that warning forward to the highest levels of the officials at the Health and Human Services, but that he received no response or was given excuses. "We were already behind the ball," he said. "That was our last window of opportunity to turn on that production to save lives of those healthcare workers, and we didn't act." Bright also told Congress that having an effective COVID-19 vaccine in 18 months is unlikely, pointing out it took 5 years to create an Ebola vaccine. Quote, "A lot of optimism is swirling around a 12 to 18 month time frame if everything goes perfectly. We've never seen everything go perfectly," unquote, he said. "I still think 12 to 18 months is an aggressive schedule, and I think it's going to take longer than that to do so. And even if a vaccine were available in a short timeline," Bright said, "it might not be safe. My concern is if we rush too quickly and consider cutting our critical steps, we may not have a full assessment of the safety that the vaccine, or so it goes, going to take some time," he said. Bright, who was ousted from his position at BARDA after he opposed the president's endorsement of chloroquine to treat the coronavirus, filed a whistleblower complaint. He is now seeking to be reinstated into his position. "I resisted efforts to promote and enable broad access to an unproven drug, chloroquine, to the American people without transparent information on the potential health risks," he told the subcommittee. The president tried to get ahead of the Bright's testimony with an early morning tweet labeling him as a disgruntled employee. Trump wrote, "I don't know the so-called whistleblower Rich Bright, never met him or even heard about him. But to me, he's a disgruntled employee, not liked or respected by people I spoke to, and who, with his attitude, should no longer be working in our government." In his testimony, Bright cautioned that the pandemic continues to spread. "A lack of swift and decisive action by the government will have dire consequences. Our window of opportunity is closing," Bright said. Without better planning, 2020 could be the darkest winter in modern history." Alright. So that's kind of the backdrop in what's going on in our day concerning the coronavirus and what our government is doing about it, and specifically this presidential administration, who is now geared not to really combat this anymore, but just to reopen the government and just shrug everything under the rug. Now, we have seen over time the divide between people who understand the seriousness of the COVID-19 and those who play lip service to it, but then wants us to snap out of it and get back into a roaring economy. And it is like, pardon me a as I'm trying to get this information up. It's like some people want to get us back to where we were so bad that they don't care if there are consequences to it. I mean, we hear that the CDC came up with its own guidelines as to into how to reopen slowly and safely for our economy, and that got buried by this administration. Dr. Fauci, who also warns us to tread lightly about this, and when we reopen, do so on the eye of the potential of us losing more people in a reopening, and so do it, by God, as safely and slowly as possible. And Trump jumped on him in his Fox Business interview because on the aspect of reopening schools, and he just totally disagrees with him on that. It is still mind-boggling. Now, there are people who are just going to turn blinders on to what is going on so that they can get back to their creature comforts and get back to their entitlements and get back to an economy and get back to, money exchanges, because it's always the big businesses that has Trump's ear that are pushing for this. And, screw the little guy. Not only consumers, but the employees. I mean, you don't have to go too far in our past in this particular pandemic to see how, by executive order, forcing open and keeping open meat packing plants, that there is no way of doing social distancing of any significance. There is no real way to protect people within that job. And so you have a petri dish that could open up. You have people who are working in close proximity in hygienic situations involving having to deal with meat and so forth, that people can get sick just going to work. As of today, or at least as of today, really, there's at least 1,420,828 cases of coronavirus in the United States. We've passed the 1.2 million mark. And now, according to Reuters graphics, which is about as accurate as I see as other ones, at least 85,354 people have died from this. We are 15,000 away from the 100,000 goal of Trump saying, this is a very good job. Okay? What I had warned about with this rush to reopen is now, from my own, cynical instinct, is now bearing out to be true. According to Business Insider, Trump is pressuring the CDC to change its death toll methodology and produce lower figures. President Trump and the members of the White House Corona Task Force has put pressure on the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to alter how it counts virus deaths. The outlet cites 5 unnamed administrative officials working on the government corona response as saying that Trump was pushing for a new methodology that could lead to a lower U.S. death toll. Yeah, he doesn't believe the deaths. Sources told the Daily Beast that Dr. Deborah Birx, I can't even pronounce her last name, that's so sad, the task force response coordinator, had urged the CDC to exclude 2 categories of people from its death count: people who were presumed to have the virus but didn't have confirmed test results, and people who did have the virus but may not have died from it. The U.S. has reported more than 82, this is from this article, 82,300 corona deaths as of Wednesday. That was Wednesday, according to Johns Hopkins data. The CDC counts corona deaths by tallying the data of local health departments and the data from death certificates digital coding system, according to the Daily Beast. One official told the news outlet that Trump worried that the criteria were so broad that it could include somebody who with coronavirus who died from falling down the stairs. Whatever. A task force official told the Daily Beast that the White House was pushing for changes because of genuine concern for the integrity of the data rather than the desire for obscuring the reality. Bob Anderson, the CDC mortality statistics chief, defended its methods, telling the Daily Beast that doctors were already specifically asked to say whether the coronavirus caused the death. Quote, we are almost certainly underestimating the number of deaths, he added. Trump has publicly supported the CDC numbers, though other reports have described him as his circle as suspicious that the figures are too high. According to the White House Post, Vince said last week that she didn't trust the CDC numbers, adding that they could be inflated by as much as 25%. Okay? A few videos ago, I talked about how Florida, whose governor is one of those who was slow to close down its local economies in his state, had started to hide the causes of deaths. That those people who died from the coronavirus, or the contributing factors of coronavirus, meaning those illnesses that opportunistically strike and then leads to death, that they started to remove the coronavirus from the death certificate and just say that the person died of, say, pneumonia or whatever contributing illness, without mentioning the overarching causality, which is contracting the coronavirus. So I mentioned that before. In Tennessee, when it was starting to ramp up in that state, they were hiding the locations of where these people died. They were hiding the numbers of people who had died from coronavirus. They didn't want people to know which locations in Tennessee would have been hotbeds of this. So you have this. You have the example in Florida. You have this going on with the Trump administration and the CDC. You have the over-eagerness to reopen, with them even admitting and saying things that they should be thinking and never saying, that they frankly don't care if people die more frequently with us reopening. That, people are going to die, but we need to reopen the economy. Past few days I mentioned, I probably did in the last couple videos, that people who are proponents of reopening the government continuously make the false equivalency of comparing this to the flu, stating that more people had died from the flu as towards coronavirus, which is no longer the case, but you bear with it. It's to the point where I had to go and bring up the actual factual medical records of our last year of how many people who have died from the flu, which is from 2019 to 2020. The estimation is going to be that the people who will die from the actual influenza is somewhere between 26,000 to 60,000. That's horrible. In the space of 4 months, or at least the space of us with our official count of cases inside the United States and a count of the death in the United States starting in early March, we have lost 86,000 people, right? 85,000. 4 months, not a year, as all these false equivalency folk always want to bring out their illnesses and their numbers to try to compare and contrast. That is a year's worth. This is months worth. Not even half a year. Could the Apple salesman realize that we're talking about oranges here? And so this all contributes to my fear that we reopen And we reopen aggressively, meaning that we don't do the slow incremental reopenings where we do have social distancing in mind, we have masks in mind, we have gloves in mind, that we just reopen. And people do get sick more frequently than they would with the shelter in place. People do die more frequently than the counts of people who are suffering and dying now, even while we're doing the slow increment of shelter in place. People die, people get sick, and then nobody bothers to count them. They don't want us to know about it because they want us to be, confident consumers and confidently go and be the consumers to go to the shops and buy the stuff, go to the movies, go to restaurants that we all want to do. Yes, we do, but we also don't want to get sick from it. Or God forbid, if we do get sick, we don't want to spread it to our friends and family or just total strangers who happen to bump into us. Here's a kind of an analogy that I thought of yesterday. Anyone remembers the movie The Beach? It's a Leo DiCaprio movie. He and a bunch of these college-age kids who are studying in Asia find this island, which really the island is like a drug ring production for some drug gang, but they allow them to stay on the beach as long as they stay on the beach and don't mess with their crops, which they do. And then they allow themselves to live in this paradise, right? Well, one of their members gets attacked by a shark. Now they're on a beach in completely rustic environment is what their paradise is, so they don't have medications, they don't have doctors, they don't have hospitals, none of that. They take a flatboat going back and forth between the mainland and this island. So they have this guy who's screaming in total agony for days. And first they feel bad about him, and they want to take care of him, but after a while, this person is bumming their high at being in paradise. So what do? They take this guy, and then they drag him out, still screaming, still in agony. They drag him out into the jungle, and then leave him there. And then they feel bad about it for about half a second, and then they go back to having their paradise again, where they're all happy again, while this guy is dying in the jungle. That is my analogy of this whole thing. Well, there's people who are just so eager to get us back into what used to be and have a roaring economy for the precious election, while they're going to shove the cases of coronavirus under the rug and the deaths under the rug, and take the people out into the jungle so we don't see it. Out of sight, out of mind. Maybe they'll pressure the media not to report on cases and deaths anymore. Those friendly ones, and then castigate those who do that. Because it's over now, right? We're past it. Things are ticking down. We're now getting better, right? Pardon my timing. Now again, all this is contingent on when we reopen that people are going to actually go en masse and patron these establishments and going back into doing their daily routines and so forth. It'd be an irony, as I said last time around, it'd be an irony if the majority of the people who still actually agree with this shelter in place and stay at home just don't show up. Or don't show up, or show up in masks or whatever, but you just have the minority there who's doing their astroturfing protests. And they're the only ones that are going to these places. Well, the businesses still suffer from that. We we have the problem with too many examples of misdirected information, misinformation. Um, Too much of a political agenda is more important than people's lives. Now, one of the things that actually strikes an interesting chord is those people who are supportive of shelter in place trying to explain to those who disagree with it and are protesting about it that the more they protest about it, the longer it may be that shelter in place is required. The governor of Michigan said this, and the protesters, of course, are now picking fights while they're waving the little their guns around and having little dolls of on nooses, which is supposed to be her. All because they want you to stay home. The entitlement and selfishness that is mixed in with these notions of personal freedoms being violated is also astounding. Is if they want to just see who can outrage the most on the other side. There was a meme floating around of a couple that was walking around these protests that says, "My freedom is more important than your lives." So how's that for a good Christian value? Simon, the more we learn about this, the more horrifying it is, the more that we need to take this seriously. But people don't want us to know more about it. They don't want us to take it seriously. They just want us to go back to the way things were. We find out how coronavirus also leads to a particular set of illnesses that affects children. But Dr. Trump doesn't want to hear anything about that, and he wants kids to go back to school. It's like the more details that we find out, the more he doesn't want people to find out about these details. And it's awfully cavalier to sacrifice so many people's lives for the sake of your own political narrative. You know, if it came down to if you marched 100,000 people into a room with Trump or any of his allies who support his agenda because they're sycophants, and someone tells them, you know, you can reopen your economy completely. You don't have to do any masks or gloves. You can just go right back and have no social distancing and just have your roaring calm. All you got to do is take this gun in your hands and you shoot these people. You just kill 100,000 people outright. Then you can have your economy back. I wonder how many people would do that. And I wonder who would do that. And it is so true that the two symbols of crisis is chaos and opportunity. And how many people are taking advantage of crisis and the chaos for their opportunities. Donald Trump revels in chaos, wants to be the instigator of chaos, wants people to be up in arms fighting each other, wants misinformation to go out so that no one can have a critical thought towards what he's doing and to have a clear eye on things. So we have misinformation on the coronavirus. We have him, in the past few weeks, supporting the protesters while saying, officially that he supports the governors, and when they want to reopen, it's their choice, but liberate Virginia, liberate Wisconsin. Doesn't support mail-in voting when he himself mailed in voted in the last election. I guess he can do that, but no one else can do that. That's just wrong and corrupt. The Wisconsin Supreme Court that made sure that people had to in-person vote when they did their primary. Also now made sure that they struck down the governor's stay-at-home order in Wisconsin. So again, what are people's lives compared to the political agenda? I wonder if people who are so gun-ho with this will accept responsibility when people die. Trump won't. We know he won't. He doesn't take responsibility for anything. And so when people do die and cases do flare up because of us going back to normal, he won't take any responsibility. He already did not. He already said what he was supposed to just think in his little pea brain, that people are going to die, but I don't care. They're going to die anyway. So we may as well have a cheeseburger while we're doing it. Paraphrase. And so, in the midst of this swirling mess of chaos, Obamagate. There's something that we can put onto page 1 and put the butcher's bill of our deaths on page 8, right? Obamagate, the greatest political conspiracy in human history. There's something that Trump said that Obama should get 50 years in prison for, and Biden too. Really? What did he do? You know what he did, so says he. Do we? What was it? There's evidence of it everywhere. Really, what's the evidence? That's a nasty question, and he waddles off. He didn't quite think this through, but of course he doesn't think things through. So, Obamagate, apparently, is concerning about the unmasking of Michael Flynn, right? And how this is somehow connected to the Russian investigation. So that was all phony and sham and me. Yeah. And that the unmasking is the greatest crime in human political history. Since Jesus was unmasked to the Romans by the Pharisees. Well, according to Andrea Mitchell, in her tweet, unmasking is a routine thing when we're having intercepts of citizens in foreign powers. This horrible thing of unmasking these people, these Americans. How dare you? Last year, 10,000 people were unmasked under the Trump administration in its Justice Department. 2018, 17,000 people were unmasked. Cut me a break, okay? Y'all who just want to, maybe want to change your mind and you just want to have this drama so bad that you're going to listen to other YouTubers on their own shows, and since they're so against the media, that they're so progressive, or they're on the other side of the progressive, they're pro-Trump or they're anti-Trump or they're like pro-Bernie or they're pro anything, or you're against the media or against the establishment, any of that, where you just have them people and they take the opinion pages of papers, those medias that they don't like, and then they interpret it for you, gentle folk. And they talk about this as this is being the biggest scandal in human history, echoing Trump. Again, 10,000 people last year, 17,000 people the year before. Trump administration. This is nothing. But you want to make it into something, like he wants to make it or something. Fine. Fine. So that will be the talking point going into the election if we don't want to talk about, you know, anything serious. We don't certainly want to talk about the 36 million people unemployed. We damn sure don't want to talk about the fact that half of the population in the White House is either tested positive for the coronavirus or is self-isolating from everyone else, including Mike Pence. Because not only that we talked about the valet last time that tested positive who handles Trump's food, Katie Miller, who's part of Pence's staff, who is also Stephen Miller's wife, also tested positive. We have a dozen Secret Service agents that tested positive, while up to, I think, 60 that are isolating themselves upon testing and further testing. Now, the White House officially are saying that their staff has to wear masks. Trump still doesn't wear masks. He did an event last night. Still, no mask. Not him and not his chief of staff, Mr. Meadows. No mask on him either, because I talked about how insulting it was last time of him behavior. But now I'm adding insult to arrogance, because it comes down to the attitude of, well, since I'm making everyone else wear masks, I don't have to wear a mask. Because me wearing a mask would send the wrong message and make me look ridiculous for the economy. So every other person who still works in the United States, who work in essential services, be it grocery stores or hardware stores, if you need hardware, to medical people that damn sure is very important and very essential. And every one of us who come in contact with other human beings that have to wear the gloves, have to wear the masks. But your president of the United States doesn't feel the need to wear a mask, because that might send the wrong impression to Wall Street or to his own pathetic man-child ego? Really? You are fine with this. It is astounding how flagrant this is, that you would be up in arms on anyone else that would do it, because no one would get to this DEFCON 2 of lunacy and abuse of power. If someone even brushed to DEFCON 5, you would be demanding that they resign. But enslavement to political agendas. You put on the blinders when you elected him because you wanted judges. You put on the blinders to what he said, what he did. You were apologists to him. You downplayed him like he downplayed the coronavirus count, downplayed the deaths. Still does. Doesn't believe the numbers. I guess the 85,000 people, they're all crisis actors. Maybe they all went to Sandy Hook. This is what you support. And I'm not going to go into whatever motivations you have to support him. I'm not going to assume, I'm not going to stereotype, because I know some people who didn't support him initially now support him because they just don't want to support Biden. That even though they supported someone who diametrically opposed Trump, when that person dropped out, they decided to go and support the one guy that their preferred candidate, and his philosophy and his politics was a complete 180 of Trump. So I can't fathom the motivation. And I'm not going to just go, I'm not going to generalize. It's like, oh, they support him because of this. They support him because of that. They are all this. They're all that. It's just I'm not going to generalize. I'm not going to. The people who are supporting, I'm not going to paint a dark picture, except for those who are actively doing bad shit or saying bad shit or or acting up because they're inspired by this guy. Not every Trump supporter is like that. There are conscientious people who are compassionate, and I can't understand the motivation as to supporting him, but nonetheless support him. So we can't generalize all people of thus is like thus, because that's lazy. And there's plenty of other reasons to be lazy. Let's not be lazy about that. All right. But yeah, Obamagate. Yeah, that's such a wildly obscene scandal that 3 years into a Trump presidency. Yeah, that we have an election period. We better bring that up now. Yeah, there's nothing. There's no motivation. This is like Hunter. Oh, by the way, yeah, Hunter Biden. How's that going? That investigation. This was this massive scandal. I'm just checking my watch, which is not on my arm, to how's that going? Oh, and also the Senate investigation of Hillary Clinton. How did that go? Yeah, that went nowhere too, because that's all political theater. That has nothing to do with anything serious. It's certainly not 85,000 people dying, and your president downplaying the prospects of more dying so they can get that rip-roaring economy for the election. He lies about testing. He lies about materiel. He lied about enacting the Defense Production Act, which he didn't do. He just said he was doing. Until something is actually done, him saying it means nothing. Haven't we learned this in 3 years? It's everyone else's fault but his? You can say the start of this thing was in Wuhan. You can say the Chinese government is rightfully responsible for disinformation and downplaying the severity of this. That doesn't absolve any other government, any other place that does the same thing, downplaying cases, downplaying deaths, downplaying the seriousness because they want to get things going, which includes your precious Donald Trump. You can blame them for the start. This middling period is all on him. And the irony of all this is that if he just kept his fucking mouth shut and kept his political agenda in his head and not on his mouth and forced people to enact it, where they want people to hide the numbers of corona deaths and corona cases, that he wants the CDC to change their methodology so they don't count as many corona deaths and corona cases. If it wasn't hawking hydrochloroquine when it was not proven, and now we have 3 studies saying that that has no beneficial point to it. That people who actually do need it, like people who are suffering from lupus, cannot get it because you're too busy with the testing bullshit. And now these people who are legitimately suffering right now are going to continue to suffer right now because they're not going to be able to get the drug because of someone opening his goddamn mouth. Or being led by some millionaire who heads a drug company and says, "Hey, why don't you hawk this for me?" "Sure, buddy." So much to talk about, but we're not going to get into it, so I'm just going to have to do another one of these soon. Nearing the 40-minute mark. So I've been rambling all this time while I had audio cameos from other people in the house. But in any event, I don't want anyone No matter what political party, no matter who you support Trump, you support Biden, you support Marvin the Martian, I don't care. I want you all to stay safe. I want you all to stay healthy. I don't want anyone to get sick. I certainly don't want anyone to die. I don't want anyone to suffer unduly because of what's going on here. No one deserves to have to live under a virus. But allowing the fear to generate anger over people who are trying to keep you safe and threatening them. And now we're seeing violence over it. Someone shot a security guard because he wanted that guy's wife to wear a mask. There are people picking fights over masks. There are people getting into rip-roaring arguments over fucking masks. A guy lost his job in his law firm because he decided to do a pro-macho, pro-gun, pro-rats Facebook post on, like, he's going to shoot anyone that tells him to wear a mask. Really? Really? Is this what we're resorting to? I know people who are fearful that this, people throw the word civil war around, and I don't necessarily believe we're in that position, simply because the people who are protesting, the people who are waving their guns around, are actually supportive of the head of this government, Donald Trump. And he is fanning the flames and encouraging them to do these protests against our governors and our local officials. So, I don't know who the rebels are in this, for this instance. But if you really don't want us to be all in this together, and you just want your personal freedoms because for no other reason other than it's just politics. You're mildly inconvenient in your life. If this leads to a mild inconvenience that you have to stay home, or you have to put on gloves, or wear a mask when you go out, or you have to wash your fucking hands, and you're so offended by this that you have to go to your state capital, or a state capital because you're probably astroturfing and you just go to a state because it's fun, and you're waving a gun around because that's your security blanket, or other reinforcements of inadequacies that you can't quite make an argument, you can't quite make a protest without wearing tactical gear. And maybe it's not about your personal freedom at all. Maybe it's just a mild suggestion. And you are all pawns being used for someone's political expediency to browbeat people into opening up perhaps too early. Yeah, numbers could be ticking down in New York, but the majority of all the cases that we're seeing, yeah, it's aggregate that New York is going down, but that was the epicenter. That was where the largest, because of the tightly packed population and the massive amounts of population. Well, that's ticking down because they are social distancing and they are sheltering in place. Other places are getting it. Other places are ticking. In fact, the ironic part is that those people who protest and those people who go in en masse, all of a sudden, they start catching it. The Wisconsin protest, or was it, no, the Michigan protest, excuse me. 73 people contracted it while they're together. But I'm sure if they, God forbid, suffer to the point of death, their death certificates won't say COVID. They'll just die of a long illness. as I used to say about people who died from AIDS before they even acknowledged AIDS' existence. Alright, guys. A little downer, but this is where our time is. I'll go into more of this the next time around. And I do want to talk about Biden and the Tara Reade situation. Because that's got to get some explanation. And there's a little bit of squirreliness that is involved in this. Which is the word swirling around. But you know there's a bit of a political thing to it. But we'll go into that next time, or the time after, depending upon what mood I'm in. I will talk to you later. Have a good night.